We're going to do a short video on how to properly wire the connections for the RATH SmartCare nurse call system by using the RATH 2900 kit. The kit includes a wire wrap labeler, very important piece, okay? A 4-pair tester, and for those that haven't taken the class already, you'll know that we can exceed the typical data cable lengths of 300 feet. So we just got a simple 4-pair tester. It's going to go through and give us continuity on the pins. A crimp tool that has matching crimp ends. Okay? We do run into sites periodically where a customer will grab a hold of whatever crimp ends that they happen to have, and they had an old crimp tool in their truck and are using that. When they crimp it down, they get that nice curvy crown that's on the end of the pins, which means that all the pins haven't been seated properly. So you have ones that are matched up and do work, included as part of the 2900 kit. And again, for those that have taken the class already, you'll know that this is a scanner that's used for the pre-configurator software. For those that haven't, the pre-configurator is used to go through and load device IDs into the system so that the individual domes for the rooms are recognized by the host controller. So with that, let's get into our wiring. Remember, we want to go through and approach it from a safety first perspective. So we have to make sure that we have our proper safety gear. Okay, first, oh yeah, oh, sorry, wrong safety glasses. Here we have our PPE, our safety goggles that we put on, and especially if we're working in an area that's currently under construction, we don't want anything falling on our head. So make sure that you're wearing proper protective gear. The things that we don't include as part of the kit is your favorite cutting tool. You can use a wire stripper if you would like, or there is actually a way to strip the sheath off the cable by using the notch that's in the center of this tool. Don't use that if you can avoid it, because the cable needs to be perfectly round. Sometimes the twist in the cable don't make it perfectly round, and then you're going to nick your wires, cause problems. You have all kinds of different things that are going on. So we want to avoid that, and we are going to take, for this example, a piece of Cat 5e. This is the actual RATH nurse call wire that you would purchase from us for installations of this type. We're going to go through and take your snips, if you're using this, and go about 2.5 to 3 inches down and just score the outside. Note, I did not cut all the way through. I just scored it, bend down in order to snap, and pull the wiring off, or the casing off of the wire. Cut that little cotton out of there to make sure that it doesn't get in the way. And then we have our 4-pair cabling. Okay. Now, in order to properly connect the system, the connections need to be done with the T568B pinout configuration that is currently on your screen. Please pay attention to the fact that the orange pair are on pins 1 and 2. That's very important because that's your communication bus. With the RATH SmartCare system, the devices are constantly talking to each other. Okay? All the information, the names, everything is all shared all the way through. And because it's shared all the way through, that communication bus is one of your most important components of the wiring plant. So if the orange pair is messed up, your system is going to have some challenges that are not only going to prevent it from functioning, but are sometimes difficult to determine where they're physically located. So again, I stripped the wire. Now I took my individual wire pairs and I spread them out. I take the back side of my snips here and I just press down with my thumb and pull across it in order to straighten them out. Okay? The orange pair has more twists in it than the other 3 pair, but We're going to do that for each of our individual wire pairs that are inside of this particular jacket. So untwist them down to near the top of the sheath and put your thumb on it and pull it out. Remember, if you're using a different tool, you're just going to lay them across something flat on one of your hand tools in order to do that. We perform this to make sure of two things. First, our wires are nice and flat and easy to work with. Second, we want to ensure that we get those extra twists out of there, because crimp ends, for those that aren't aware, are actual insulation displacement devices. So let's think of my snips as the actual tooth on one of those 8 pins. So you got those 8 gold pins that are across the front. Well, on the top of the tooth, or on the top of that pin, that part that you plug in is going to be that smooth gold part, but underneath is that tooth. So you're going to slide the wires into those slots that are on there, and when you crimp it down, you're actually taking and smashing that tooth down into the wire, displacing the insulation and making your connection. So if we got different twists and turns in the wire and things like that, and we go to put it in and we don't quite get that tooth seated properly, that can again cause an improper connection. So following our T568B pinout, we know that the orange-white pair is on the outside. After the wires have all been laid out, then we want to go through and get them placed properly so that we can slide them into the connector. What we're going to do is follow an old telephone way of doing it. I'm an old phone guy. Okay? So we have tip and ring. Tip is normally the white with the solid slashes, and ring would be the more solid color. So the orange-white pair is, tip is the white with orange dashes, ring is the solid orange with the small white dashes. And we follow that across from pins 1 to 8. Tip, ring, all the way through until we have all 8 pins laid out, except what we know on the T568B pinout configuration is that there's a shift when we get to the center pins. Okay? The green and the blue pairs shift their tip and ring to kind of reverse them. That's the pinout. I didn't make it up, but I do know it. So we're going to start with pin 1, which is the tip of the orange pair, and then go ring of the orange pair. Pin 3 is the tip of the green pair. Pin 4 is the ring of the blue pair. Remember that shift that I talked about way back when, like 8 seconds ago? Then we go with the ring of the blue pair, followed by the tip of the green pair. And then finally we are going to go with the tip of the brown pair and close it out with pin 8 being the ring of the brown pair. So note that as I was laying those things out, I was giving it a little wiggle in order to make the cable sit nice and flat. And if we do that, we should be able to let go of it and have them stay in relative line. Our crimp ends, okay? The crimp ends, the casing needs to go up past that little indent that's on the bottom of the crimp end, because that's the part that holds the sheath. Okay, pretty simple. So we take the crimp end and we hold it next to our wire. And we can tell, hey, if that's going up to the sheath and the ends of my wires are going all the way up to the very end of my connector, then we can tell where to make our cut. So, cut it straight across. Okay? I see people cut it at an angle because it's easier to go through and get it into the connector. If you do that, you're going to be causing problems. Okay? You have to have all those pins seated correctly. I was at a job site, they cut it at an angle, and they wound up cutting the orange pair, the communications pair, short because they cut it at an angle. So cut it straight across, and your cut looks like this. Then we slide our connector in. When we slide the connector in, we can see where that sheath is seated up past where that crimp is, because that also locks into place. We take the crimp tool, slide the end into the crimp tool, and give it a good squeeze. After we do that, ta-da, we have that end done. So, while I'm going through and doing the other end, because I want to demonstrate, hey, this is what we do. There are no shortcuts. Okay? But when we're doing the wiring on the actual job site, what we want to do is take a Sharpie and write on the cable where it's coming from, okay? So that when I go and drop this thing down from the ceiling, I can see on there, oh, from host controller, that would be from the head-end equipment, or from room 101, okay? Then, on the other one, because it's a daisy chain, I want to write where it's going to on the opposite end of that cable. So when I get this cable, one end should be labeled with where it came from, and the other end should be where it's going to. Okay? Nice and simple way of doing it. And then we're going to utilize that when we get our cables done, because the actual process is we go through, run our wires, and mark them with a Sharpie or a pen, your favorite crayon if you will. Then we're going to do our terminations, and then we test it. Testing it is extremely important. Okay? And for those of you that are doing parts and smarts, okay, and you're hiring out electrical contractors in order to do the wiring, make sure that they understand the terms on the front end and that they need to provide you with some type of documentation that says that each of the cables that they provided you with were tested good. The simple version is that's if you hire that out, that is their only job in this thing. And if they don't do it correctly and cost you extra time, money, and headaches, okay, then as long as the document is written in such a fashion as there's a clear understanding of who performs what function, you can have them provide whatever corrective measures are necessary. So, the other end of my cable, again, tip, ring, tip of green, ring of blue, tip of blue, ring of green, tip of brown, ring of brown. And we give it that nice little wiggle back and forth in order to get the wires to lay in an appropriate fashion. Take our crimp end and we're going to line it up to make sure that we can see how deep we need to go with it. Then cut the excess wires off the end and slide that into our connector, making sure that we keep our pins laid properly. And when we get done, seat that thoroughly, take our crimp tool, and perform the same process. Okay? This may not have been a terribly exciting video, but it's necessary because you have to know all the steps. Okay, we went through and ran the wire, we had it marked. Okay, then we take our labeler, okay, and we print our labels for where that wire is going to on the one end, okay, and where it's coming from for the other end. Okay. The actual process is take your 4-pair cable tester from your RATH kit. You got your wires run. It's best to work in teams on this. It's not mandatory, but it's best. Okay. Then you get your partner and you put one end of the cable tester on one end of the cable after you guys do your crimp ends properly, and then put the other end on the other cable, making sure that it's plugged into the RJ45 connector end. Then what you should see, the transmitting end is going to go in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and those lights should be reflected in that order on the other side. If they do not go in order, you swapped a pair somewhere. If all of the pins aren't there, then one of them is either cut, not seated, there's something wrong with it, and it needs to be fixed. Now, since this one is good, I know that my cable is good, so I take my tester out, and as a final step, I'm going to take the labels that tell me where the cable is coming from and going to. I'm going to peel it back off of it. I'm going to place that about an inch behind that connector. Wrap it around and done. Same thing on the other end. Now this helps out from an administrative standpoint and logistics standpoint. Okay? Hey, it's 4 o'clock on Friday, let's get out of here. And then Monday you come back, you go, oh, where did we leave off? Well, you know that if it's just a cable that's dangling there with no ends on it, that was run and needs to be terminated and tested. Okay? If there's one that has ends crimped on it but doesn't have the wire wrap label on, then either it needs to be repaired because it didn't test good, or it hasn't been tested yet. And of course, a cable that tests good is going to have the wire wrap labels on and the crimp ends on. I hope that this video was helpful to you. Please go out to the RATH website. For those that haven't signed up for the RATH SmartCare webinar, do so. I'm the one that teaches it. We'll be able to move forward from there and ensure that you have a safe and easy installation. Thank you for your attention and have a fantastic rest of your day.